Welcome to Supply Chain Talks. My name is Kristian Mortensen. I'm a Senior Director, Global Partnership and Alliances at project44. And today I'm also your host for Supply Chain Talks. project44 has hand-curated a strong partner network in order to extend and enable the best possible customer experience. During spring and summer, we welcome you to our partner series, Supply Chain Talks. These conversations touch on current developments in global supply chains and the world of logistics. Today, we warmly welcome Mr. Stephen Holmes to Supply Chain Talks. Stephen is a Sales Director for UK and Ireland at BluJay Solutions. Stephen, I'm very happy to have you join.
Very good to be here. Thank you very much indeed for the invitation.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, we saw that you are UK and Ireland, so perhaps as the European Union and the UK say continue to untangle the ramification of Brexit on the logistics and supply chain community, I would kind of love to ask you, how do you see Brexit impact business in 2021 and going forward?
Well, yes, the inevitable Brexit question is always around, isn't it? And thinking back to just a few months ago in kind of, well, the end of December, really, I guess, just coming into January, there was that monumental agreement, or at least an agreement was made before the end of the year. So we didn't move out without any deal at all. And I think that there was, amongst the supply chain community, a collective sigh of relief that we weren't going to kind of head over the precipice and into an abyss. And then after that, there was kind of a period of realization of what Brexit was fundamentally about. And for the supply chain, as I've seen it in the UK and Ireland, this has been about an increased administrative burden. There's been a huge amount of increase in documentation requirements and transfer of information around the community in order to support particularly UK European movements. So we've seen people having to invest in that process. We've seen some troubling circumstances. A senior manager that I was dealing with during the process, for example, ended up in the back of an articulated lorry trying to find the rules of origin around particular parcels in the back of a truck. Those sort of elements have now moved aside, and there is increasingly an acceptance of where we are and what we're doing. But in doing so, it has really focused back on some of the pre-existing issues in the supply chain in the UK, which have been exacerbated by this process. And the number one amongst those is the driver shortage issue, which of course isn't purely a UK issue. It is a pan-European or indeed a global issue. But really, we have seen that being focused by circumstances around both COVID and Brexit. And in saying that, what I mean is that we have seen drivers leave the UK, leave the industry, move back to Europe if they've been European partners because of the changes in requirements. And that's, as I say, has really exacerbated the processes around driver availability and focused also on the conditions of drivers, the age ranges, the conditions that they experience when they arrive and they leave site, and all about the industry that actually that they're involved with at the present moment in time. So it's it's quite fundamental and ongoing for quite some time, I believe.
Stephen, I want to kind of pick up on the beginning of your statement on Brexit, where you kind of mentioned that increase in administrative burden. So if we look at how does the efficiency and the ability of supply chains to service their customers in the way they want, then become a strong differentiator between competing organizations.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, the focus for some of our internal research here at BluJay for a number of years now has been around the customer experience, and I think that's really what we're referring to here, isn't it? It's been recognised by the likes of Gartner and other publications I'm sure we both read on a regular basis that the customer is looking for more from the supply chain, from the supplier. And the expectation, once again, this is Gartner research referred to, is that they expect the producer, the supply chain, to understand that where they are, what they do. They want to be informed. They want to be told of what's going on. They effectively want to be within a proactive relationship in terms of the supply chain and the experience, rather than in a receiving relationship. It's quite often been the case, and as we both referred to, these wonderful devices, our mobile phones, have become the center of some of that understanding increasingly. So yes, the experience is key, and I'm sure, rather like you, I often relate back to my mobile phone for my e-commerce parcel, my delivery, which has been, of course, increased once again through the recent pandemic and the circumstances that we've all endured over the last 12, 18 months now.
With all that in mind, what are, let's say, the 5 signs that it's time to modernize your supply chain technology?
Okay, yes. That's interesting. I think that we'd, once again, certainly within BluJay and beyond, we'd certainly challenge people to look at modernization of the supply chains before it became an issue, to really move from a position of advantage to look at strategically, what do you want your organization to look like in a period of time in order to satisfy the increasing demands of the marketplace. I mean, we all see the impact of Amazonization, as it's called, or Uberization, the Amazon effect. What does that mean in terms of what the requirements are today and what they're going to be in future? And move and make decisions around these things and move towards those goals as soon as possible. And so around what we see as the issues are, of course, poor customer experience. If you're having complaints from your customer pool, then that's certainly time to be looking at your systems, system support, ways and abilities to interact more effectively with your customer base. So that should be a focus. If you are looking at dated systems with poor infrastructure and support, definitely move forward right now. Look at cloud opportunities as opposed to on-prem. That's probably the biggest move we've seen in the last 3 to 5 years, certainly. If there's cost challenges, that's something which systems will certainly be able to aid and improve upon. And it's really about introducing greater flexibility and agility to operations. That's what systems will ultimately be able to provide you with, being able to do things differently while controlling cost and providing an improved customer experience around it as well.
It seems to me that if a company has no TMS, then they want one. If they have an old one, they want a new one. If they have a hosted one, then they want the cloud one. So the TMS market continues to grow globally, even during this economic crisis. Yeah, so transportation has become an even more, let's say, essential part of the supply chain, increasing the need for more advanced technology. What are the key drivers behind this need for digitalization?
Yes, I mean, yeah, I think COVID has obviously been a very important element of that. And if I think, once again, if we think back to the first 3 months of the pandemic, and this was kind of the period I was thinking of, March, April, May last year. So this period last year, there's several cartoons doing the round about who was the most important factor in your digitalization program, and it was the CEO, CFO, or COVID-19, and that there's a huge amount of truth behind that, isn't there? That the focus became very much more apparent on the supply chain because of these competing requirements. The shift to B2C deliveries, for example, was very much part of that process. The huge swathes of change that there were in supply chains. Now, fundamentally, in the UK, I think the figure is 98% of consumer goods are transported via road at some stage during their supply chain life cycle. Well, within that environment, all of those goods would have been affected by, in some way, shape, or form, whether it be drivers not being available due to COVID or restrictions on bit supply, etc. So a huge amount of drive from that perspective. But a couple of other things I would certainly mention, included within that driver, because of the restriction around COVID, the requirement for paper-driven solutions has very much been diminished. Right up until the time when they started, a large number of the large retailers within the UK were still demanding paper-driven proof of delivery. Now, that had to go overnight. And so there's a huge amount of advantage there to suddenly capturing that information on a handheld device and being able to pass that back into the supply chain to improve statistical advantages, payment terms, visibility, load control, all of those good things. And the final one, as I mentioned, is certainly the driver shortage piece as well. Digitalization helps to support a more efficient and effective management of drivers, But also, if we're thinking longer term, and I mentioned strategic thinking already, and I'm thinking about what the future looks like and what might be part of it. A digitalized environment could certainly help encourage younger people into an industry which is really very much the dearth of young people. Within the UK, it's probably the same as elsewhere, but we're talking about an aging driver population. Certainly more than 50% of the driver population being over 50 in the UK now. That's part of the poor reputation, the poor conditions of driving, but also the fact that it's still a very traditional industry. And if an industry which is reflective more of the apps environment and the kind of iPad kind of solution setting scope for an understanding of what it does, would certainly help move us in the right direction and help us to embrace some of the challenges which are currently out there.
Stephen, in your job, you work both with, let's say, existing and potential customers in determining the business value and return on investments from deploying a TMS like BluJay. What are the key, let's say, top 3 or 5 business problems that a customer wants to solve?
Okay, I think we all have to start with the basic understanding that no organization will go through a change process, because that's what we're talking about, isn't it? Here with the TMS implementation, with the integration of digitalized services, we are talking about a change process, and no organization would step into that unless there was an identifiable return on investment, an absolute value target at the end of that. And we work extensively with organizations to help identify what that potential target looks like, and it comes through a whole manner of elements and a whole manner of different things that can come through from the process. And when we're talking about the value, then it's efficiency benefits. So, for example, reducing administration tasks and manual tasks, integrating, for example, an ETA delivery for a vehicle, having a customer direct access to notifications so they can see when it's going to come about, and so that you're reducing the manual process. And you're improving the efficiency benefits of the organization. Within that, I think the biggest driver is still, though, about increasing turnover through the methodology, through the subject matter that we've already discussed, which is the customer experience. We know intrinsically that if you improve the customer's experience, they will order more regularly from you, and they'll certainly recommend you also to other people or other organizations, and help to increase turnover for a business. But I think then finally, allied to that is another point we mentioned earlier, which is the ability to improve. So with having more typically siloed operating conditions, which is quite often the case with traditional environments. So an organization that's been built over time, they may have a number of systems within their organization, all operating independently with data silos that don't speak to one another. By closing the gaps between them and then creating an integrated data platform, you then provide a platform to improve. You can see things in real time, you understand the issues in real time, and you have the ability to interact, therefore, and provide a different outcome and a different solution. So it's very much around that visibility control elements that come through a system implementation that allow you to do things differently in future. And of course, to respond to forthcoming challenges, as we've seen with COVID, that came out of nowhere for most people, or something like Brexit, which has been more transient, more staged in its progress. That, of course, none of which prepared us for evergreen. But there you go. That's the life of supply chain, isn't it?
Really is. And I like when you mentioned challenges, because you can say just when global supply chains kind of were recovering or trying to recover from this global pandemic, then it took another setback when we had the mega ship blocking the Suez Canal. And that once more showed how fragile global supply chains are. How do you see events like COVID, Brexit, Suez Canal impact a company's plan and their on investments and technology and modernizing their operations in general?
Absolutely. Well, it's the old adage, isn't it, that nobody likes surprises, and for business, it's absolutely the case that these have been surprises. Once again, referring back to my own experience, a contact that I was trying to deal with on a regular basis to move a project forward was making a presentation about the circumstances of the evergreen. He said never in a million years would he have imagined a few weeks before that he was making a board level presentation about the impact of a supply ship being struck in the Suez Canal. But they had, I think it was around about 10 containers actually on the Evergreen. This is for an e-commerce operation within the UK, and another about 200 sat behind them. So these are fundamental impact that will impact an organization's ability to manage properly cost, resources, stock levels, all the elements of supply chain on a day-to-day basis. So the only way around that is to have the systems and the capabilities in-house in order to identify the issue and then to manage it as appropriately as possible under those circumstances.
Last question, Stephen. Real-time visibility in supply chains are gaining a lot of traction because of all these events. And let's say United States and Europe is leading in adoption. Sure. Do you see any differences in UK and Ireland in terms of adapting visibility? Is that a different market, or is it the same as the rest of Europe?
I think that fundamentally you're right. I mean, probably the number one requirement when we're talking about TMS is visibility in all its forms. Visibility of order line level information coming into the planning structure, right the way through that process through to execution and proof of delivery. So having that data available and visible throughout that process. Of course, for the customer, it is very much around the visibility of where is my product. That they don't necessarily have the same requirement to know where the fleet or the network is at that moment in time, and they're very specific around the individual product. I think that with the UK and Ireland and the challenges that we have, mentioned things like driver shortages and the impact of COVID, and the ongoing Brexit impact and implications as well. We are very keen to understand how we can improve the efficiencies of supply chains in general, and therefore the conditions also for drivers, etc., through the management of particularly collection and delivery site management. So on and off site, the capability of turning trucks around, hopefully providing some additional backhaul capabilities. So those elements are certainly profound, but I think they probably resonate elsewhere as well. Certainly, the particular issues of Brexit are far more heavily felt here in the UK, and we do understand the tracking loads across the channel is of primary importance to a lot of organisations, and we do see good tracking information, but it's been apparent for some years now. Just having the knowledge of whether goods are still in continental Europe or somewhere in the UK can have a huge impact on an organisation's ability to effectively manage their stock and, of course, their customers' expectations here in the UK. So we're probably at the sharpest of the sharp end of those kind of transaction elements of visibility. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Stephen. First, I want to say, thank you for really the partnership between BluJay and project44. And also thank you very much for your engagement in making the partnership such a success, and for participating in supply chain talks here today. So thank you very much, Stephen.
No, thank you very much indeed. Most welcome. And yes, it's to further the partnership further.
Good. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you.